I had been married to Traitor for many years. Before I died, he found his first love. The two of them, with white hair, held hands and walked into the Civil Affairs Bureau. I entertained relatives and friends in my house. She was having fun and he was smiling. He said this was the long-awaited companionship until old age. Only then did I know that the first love that one couldn't obtain was the true love that one remembered for a lifetime. After being reborn, I no longer regarded him as a treasure. But he followed behind me, begging me to take a look at him. I was reborn and returned to the first year of university. I dragged my luggage and walked into the school. Traitor came walking towards me. He was my future husband. He was also the scumbag who married his first love on the 7th day after my death. On the 8th day, he handed over the company to her child. And my 2 children, following their father, quickly changed their tune and called her mom. They completely trampled on all my efforts. Traitor had a bewitching face and exuded a lot of youthful spirit. He spoke gently and politely, different from any man I had ever met. Just like now. He glanced at the snakes and bag in my hand and the suitcase that couldn't be washed clean no matter how hard I tried, without showing any sign of minding. "Hello, classmate. Do you need any help?" In my previous life, I nodded with a blushing face. Even though this little weight was nothing to someone like me who was used to doing farm work. Later, I started to pay attention to him. I went to class on time every day just to be able to see him. Although most of the time he was brought by his roommates. Later, my grades became outstanding. And he noticed me. Throughout the 4 years of university, I gave him intensive tutoring at the end of each semester. And our relationship grew closer. Just being classmates was enough to make me happy for a long time. I always thought it was just my own secret crush. Maybe I would, like other classmates, only have contact with Traitor during university. But on the day of graduation, he called me to a bar. He was lying on the table, drunk. In the crystal glass filled with colorful liquid, he raised his head. His blurred eyes showed hesitation and vulnerability. This was the first time I saw him in such a state. "Aurora, do you want to date?" Even though I knew he was talking drunk, I still didn't hesitate. Just like a moth that knows it will be burned by the fire, I wouldn't regret it even if it meant death. I had been married to Traitor for so long that I had forgotten how energetic he was when he was young. Unconsciously, I felt a sense of relief in my heart. It was like releasing a rope that I had been holding tightly for a long time and suddenly realizing that it was meaningless. I shook my head, "Thank you. But no need." I carried my things and passed by him. At this age, he liked strong perfume. And I could smell it clearly even when we passed by each other sideways. Just like his shining eyes. Fortunately, heading fulfilledly. It's not too late for everything. Traitor. In this life, I won't pester you anymore. Let's both set each other free. On the first night of sleeping in the dormitory, I didn't toss and turn as I had imagined. Instead, I slept soundly. In my previous life, I almost liked for Traitor. What he said today. Whether his attitude towards the children was good or not tomorrow. I lived the way he wanted his wife to be. Perhaps due to excessive pressure. I aged very quickly and even died earlier than him. I turned over, not feeling the usual tiredness. I realized again that I had been reborn. "Aurora, are you asleep?" I instinctively replied, "Not yet." My roommate pulled open my curtain. And her pretty face suddenly appeared. "It's only 8 o'clock and you're going to sleep. Are you an old person?" I was taken aback. There was no way around it. In my previous life, after getting older, I went to rest at a very regular time every day. But Traitor rarely came back because the company was getting bigger and bigger. In the end, it was already very difficult for us to see each other a few times a year. My roommate didn't dwell on this issue. Instead, she said excitedly, "The class is going to organize a dinner party next month. Are you coming?" I instinctively wanted to refuse. I suddenly realized that I used to be like this. Always revolving around Traitor. In the end, I didn't even have a friend to talk to intimately. My roommate was still waiting for my answer. I nodded, "Okay." After no longer paying attention to Traitor, my world became wider and wider. I made new friends. Overcame my inner inferiority complex. and tried my best to raise the height of my thoughts with books. Sometimes, at the invitation of my roommate, we would go shopping and have meals together. When I was in my sophomore year, I found a part-time job. With the memories of my previous life, I quickly stood out in the company and received an offer promising me a job upon graduation. My life was getting better day by day. Unlike my changes, Traitor still high-profile like pursued Siren, the first love he had thought about all his life. The night I learned the news of their relationship from my roommate, I still couldn't fall asleep. In fact, I harbored resentment towards Traitor. Before I died, I watched as Traitor's hands trembled while he dialed Siren's phone number. The two of them were silent for a long time. Finally, having fulfilled my answer, Traitor spoke. The doctor said Aurora is dying. Will you come? Siren didn't answer, but booked the earliest flight. When he went to the airport to pick up Siren, I took my last breath. My soul watched them. Siren was already old, but she was well maintained. The black lace dress accentuated her slender figure, showing off her curves. She didn't seem restricted by her age at all. She took off her sunglasses, revealing her red eyes. She picked up a white chrysanthemum, placed it in front of my photo, and bowed deeply. I didn't expect this. You should take care and not grieve too much. Then, without a woe sigh, she stood in front of Traitor and told him about her last sickness over the years. My children chose a photo of me with a beaming smile. I remembered the reason for taking such a photo. That day, Traitor took the initiative to come home and said he had invited a photographer to come over. Even though it was for the sake of promoting family harmony, I was still very happy. Because that day, Traitor took the initiative to invite someone to introduce his family. Only after I broke free from the self-imposed constraints did I realize how pitifully humble I had been. It seemed that being recognized by him was my greatest pride. Then, let out a low sigh. In front of the photo that I thought was the happiest, Traitor quietly listened to Siren's show of weakness in her tone. After a long time, he held her in his arms. It's my fault. His voice echoed in the morning hall. Even when he was on the verge of death, Traitor was still willing to forgive Siren. All that I had sacrificed had become a joke. Traitor and Siren's love affair was vigorous. They dated everywhere on campus. The library, the playground, the cafeteria. Just like ordinary couples, they became a beautiful story on campus. Before I knew it, she became the me of my previous life, chasing after Traitor and accommodating him. But I knew that these were just her actions during the honeymoon period of their relationship. When their feelings faded, she would still follow her family's request to study abroad. She would abandon Traitor without hesitation. Siren always knew what she wanted. Just like now, she was willing to accompany Traitor and act like a loving couple. She also came to today's gathering. The two of them sat down opposite me, whispering sweet nothings to each other. Fortunately, having fulfilled after I was reborn, all my thoughts were focused on my part-time job and studies. My concern for this man gradually faded away with time. Now, seeing them being so intimate didn't stir up any emotions in me. At least, they were quite a match. Whatever Siren wanted to eat, Traitor would immediately pick it up for her. Siren's delicate hands didn't even peel the shrimp shells. I had never known that Siren was so special to Traitor. No wonder he couldn't wait to get married after his original wife died. The power of first love was truly great. When the classmates saw how affectionate the two of them were, they all smiled and said that they should get married after graduation. Before Traitor could say anything, Siren immediately changed the topic. I saw Traitor's face sink instantly. So she didn't even consider having a long-term relationship with him at this moment. I covered my upturned lips with a wine glass. But Traitor didn't flare up on the spot. He quickly resumed his previous smile, as if that look of disappointment and anger was just my illusion. After the gathering ended, I was a step behind because I went to the restroom. Everyone left in twos and threes, holding hands. Only Traitor and Siren were still in the private room. Why didn't you make a commitment just now? Through the half-open door, Traitor looked at Siren with a gloomy expression. Siren, on the other hand, smiled brightly. I just think that marriage is too heavy a matter for us. Besides, Didn't you also say that we're still young and don't need to get married too early? Siren's words were reasonable and well-founded. And Traitor couldn't find a single fault. I finally understood why Traitor had thought about Siren all his life. I could never say words like these in my life. Perhaps it was due to my family background. I would only try to please Traitor and use my own way to make him not have to worry. After doing such things too many times, no one would think it wasn't a matter of course. It was I who first imprisoned myself in the position of a wife and added a lot of restrictions to myself. I voluntarily allowed Traitor to order me around. Perhaps I should also learn from Siren's confidence in relationships. While I was still thinking about the mistakes I made in my previous life, the quarreling sound inside got louder and louder. Traitor slapped the table hard. Don't think I can't do without you. Do you believe that as long as I beckon, there will be someone willing to be my girlfriend? My mind went blank. And I just felt a buzzing sound. The scene of his confession in my previous life was vivid in my mind. I suddenly understood why he had called me that night. Because I was someone who would come when called and leave when dismissed. In his heart, I was the woman who would follow him as soon as he beckoned. Like a lonely boat, I drifted on the dark night lake for a long time. All I could see was boundless loneliness and a chill. The man who, when I first met him, was like a spring breeze in the mountains, gradually lost his face. He became blurred and distant. I hadn't yet recovered from the shock of that sentence when I saw Traitor striding out. When he saw me, he first frowned. And he turned his head to look at Siren, who was still angry inside. He directly grabbed my arm tightly. Do you want to be my girlfriend? I had never imagined that I would repeat what happened in my previous life in such a situation. Without the filter of love, I realized that Traitor's words were not what a suitor should say at all. He was more like a superior judge. He thought that lowering his head to notice me was a matter of great pride for me. Before I completely gave up on him, I did think so. But this time, I slapped him hard. The tears that I had held back for a long time flowed down. Traitor, don't do anything against your conscience. This slap was not only for his wanton trampling on others, but also for that fool who had spent decades of her life on him. Scenes from the past flashed through my mind like watching flowers on horseback. I drank until my stomach bled at the wine table for his business deal. I busied myself for him even though I also had to take care of the child. I took a long flight to deliver documents to him while being pregnant. Just because he said that this document was very important and he could only trust me. I could list all these things one by one. But it seemed that the only person who cared about these and made such efforts was me. He, who accepted everything passively, would soon forget all about it. Just like now. He didn't care about my wishes at all and just wanted to vent his anger in front of Siren. And when Siren saw me slap Traitor, she rushed out directly. What are you doing? Do you have any manners? I sneered and said, I have no manners? I'm still better than you people who like to use passersby as part of your game. Traitor, you'd better not show up in front of me again. Otherwise, I'll beat you up every time I see you. After leaving, I was shaking all over. This man whom I had loved all my life and for whom I had exhausted all my efforts, suddenly tearing my relationship with him apart in person. I still couldn't help but tremble. But now that I'd taken the first step, I don't need to care about the road ahead. At least, I won't have any connection with Traitor in this life. That night, I had a very long dream. On the night he proposed, we had just secured the investment and were celebrating in the office. I drank desperately for this business deal. I drank red wine, white wine, and anything I could get my hands on. My heart didn't settle until the other party signed the contract. I was so drunk that I curled up on the sofa. The office was very small, and the sofa was uncomfortable. But thinking that we could move to a high-rise building the next day, and the company would take a step forward, I couldn't help but raise the corners of my mouth. Traitor was the same. He propped his chin with his hand and looked at me for a long time. When I opened my eyes and looked at him, the bright incandescent light illuminated the emotions in his eyes clearly. There was no disgust or compromise. At least he didn't want to marry me just because of the passage of time. I raised the corners of my mouth and tilted my head to look at him. It was obviously the simplest sentence. But I held back my sobs for a long time before I agreed. I didn't want to make a fool of myself too much. But my heart couldn't help but tremble slightly. Okay. In this simple exchange of words, we went to get the marriage certificate the next day. Traitor was a good husband. He came home on time every day and reported his whereabouts punctually. At least during the newlywed period. He didn't do anything wrong. Many people said that he was a perfect husband. I thought so too. In such ordinary days. We had our first child. For the sake of the family, I followed Traitor's advice and resigned to become a housewife. During the period when his company went public, he almost lived a life of day and night reversal. Coincidentally, I was pregnant with our second child. But seeing his thin face, I felt even more distressed. I cooked hangover soup for him while being pregnant and drove myself to the hospital for checkups. Even though he never asked about it once, I would also take the initiative to help him out of trouble. He was too busy. These 4 words supported me through lonely years. But now I understand. He gave me the title of his wife, but he gave his whole heart to Siren. After that slap, I never saw Traitor again. Instead, there were more and more opportunities in the company. I began to focus all my attention on work in addition to my studies. In my previous life, I had also helped Traitor, so I could handle many things with ease. Soon, the graduation season arrived. And I officially joined the company and started working full-time. And my 3 roommates all had their own destinations. I used the money I had saved to buy a 1-bedroom and 1 living room apartment in this city. It was very small, but it made me feel at ease. In this room, I didn't need to please anyone. Nor did I need to get up early to cook or wait for someone to come back at night. I would take a walk in the nearby park after work every day and just lie in bed on weekends. Perhaps God let me be reborn because it wanted me to live my life for myself this time. But who would have thought that on the day of the first snow, Traitor joined my company? After work, he caught up with me. The snowflakes fell on his head and shoulders and quickly disappeared. Aurora, I thought I was seeing things. But why did you pretend not to see me? Aren't we classmates? I held an umbrella and felt a bit impatient. I was too busy today and didn't see you. Traitor still wanted to say something. But I turned around and walked towards the subway. I didn't see the man coming out of the elevator behind me. He was noble and reserved. With an outstanding temperament. He took the umbrella from the secretary behind him and handed it to Traitor. Why haven't you gone back yet? Traitor smiled and said, Little uncle. I met Aurora. She is the amazing girl I told you about in school. Little uncle. You have to hold on to her tightly, and don't let her change jobs. Protector pushed up the gold-rimmed glasses on his nose and let out a soft laugh. His hoarse voice was almost inaudible. Okay. After the spring festival, I was assigned to the marketing department. And unexpectedly, Traitor was also a member of it. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Aurora. Long time no see. I really didn't understand why he could be so familiar with me as if nothing had happened. During the 4 years of college, under my deliberate avoidance, except for the inevitable contacts in the class, I always avoided him at other times. But now that we were colleagues, I could only force myself to nod at him gently with a tough attitude. I became crazy about running business outside. I didn't know why I had to avoid him so much. For someone like me who had nothing, running away was the best solution. At least the bonus deposited in my salary card every month wouldn't lie to me. The business I took on and my abilities soon caught the attention of the boss. Protector. He began to let me get involved in better business deals. Either intentionally or unintentionally. In just half a year, my salary reached a level that even surprised me. Protector was a very mysterious man. I had been in the company for so long. And no one dared to mention anything about his private life. I heard that once a secretary tried to abuse her power for personal gain and knocked on his door in the middle of the night when they were on a business trip. She was fired the next day. Since then, even though Protector was incredibly handsome, no one dared to have any improper thoughts about him. So when I sent him to the airport, I was trembling all over and didn't even dare to meet his gaze. Do I scare you that much? This unexpected sentence made me suddenly raise my eyes, and I accidentally met a pair of eyes as deep as a black pool. Everyone knew that Protector was always serious and rarely smiled. But I didn't know if it was my illusion. It seemed that the corners of his mouth turned up. I quickly lowered my head and secretly thought that I must have had an illusion because I worked overtime till late yesterday. Unexpectedly. The next moment, he reached out and ruffled my hair. Okay. I'm leaving now. Protector's voice was particularly low and enchanting in the empty airport. Take good care of yourself. He passed by me and went to board the plane. I stared blankly at his figure. But unexpectedly saw Traitor with red eyes. The boarding numbers at the airport kept cycling. I saw Traitor standing 10 steps away from me. He was only wearing a white shirt. And his hair was messy. The tip of his nose was also red. And it seemed that he had just cried. I suddenly remembered that we had already graduated. And it seemed that it was also the time for Siren to go abroad. I didn't know why Siren was so determined to break up with Traitor when she went abroad. But at least before the Siren family fell, she really didn't contact Traitor again. I just didn't expect that he had actually come to the airport to try to get her back before getting drunk at night. My hands curled into fists. And the unwillingness from my previous life welled up in my heart. Finally, having fulfilled, I swallowed it back. What was the use of holding him accountable now? He didn't know anything. He was just a person without the memories of the previous life. Just as I was about to lift my foot to leave, he walked over. His voice was hoarse and choked with sobs. Aurora, are you in a relationship with my little uncle? What? My eyes suddenly widened. And I took 2 steps back. Little uncle? Was the little uncle who had always led abroad in my previous life Protector? This news was quite significant. Traitor has a young uncle who was a late-born child in the Protector family. 7 years older than him. However, he had always only been talked about. Even when I got married to Traitor, his uncle couldn't be reached because he was on an outdoor adventure. According to Traitor, his uncle was a person with strong opinions and had a rather distant relationship with the family members. When Traitor achieved some success and we went back home again, his uncle had already settled abroad and became an explorer. But now, how could he be starting a company in the country? And how could Traitor even be working in his company? Doubts kept popping into my mind one after another. And I even forgot to clarify Traitor's misunderstanding of me. Seeing my reaction, Traitor thought I had acquiesced. He let out a cold laugh. I used to think you were an ambitious girl. But it turns out you're no different from others. Traitor stood up straight and looked down at me haughtily. You'd better give up the idea of climbing up the social ladder. My uncle won't marry you. His words were too hurtful. And I was spurred to regain some rationality. Is that so? I was too lazy to defend myself. I really didn't want to talk much to Traitor. Besides, I didn't plan to have any relationship with him at all. Did it really matter what image I had in his eyes? Even a clay figurine has some temper. Traitor, don't you think you're being a bit meddlesome? Could it be that having a few conversations in the company means we're in a relationship? I sneered in the same way he did. You're only in your 20s. Don't you have anything better to do? Spreading rumors all day long. You. Traitor's eyes wide and in disbelief. It was a long time before he contained his mockery. Sorry. I'm just in a bad mood. I looked at him coldly. What does that have to do with me? Traitor felt even worse. Aren't you supposed to comfort me? I said impatiently, I'm not your mother. Do you expect everyone to circle around you just because you're feeling down? Traitor seemed to hear these words for the first time. He was stunned for a moment and then gave a bitter smile. You're right. Aurora. It seems that only you won't spoil me every time. I stared at his opening and closing mouth. And the humble me from the previous life emerged again. No, Traitor. In the previous life, Aurora was the person in the whole world who spoiled you the most. In the previous life, for the sake of this small family, I was willing to give everything. I knew he didn't like a marriage filled with calculations like his parents. So I rarely made demands on him. But in the end, it seemed that I got nothing. Not even a shred of pity. I fell seriously ill on the day when the late cherry blossoms were in bloom. My children and grandchildren were all around me, crying. I didn't see Traitor. At that time, I could barely breathe. I had been waiting for him my whole life. And even on the verge of death, I was still waiting for him. But he didn't come. In my heart, he had always been like a lofty full moon. He shouldn't have lowered himself for trivial matters. People say that young couples become companions in old age. But now, he left me to face death alone. The wallpaper in the VIP ward was off-white, giving a faint warm feeling. But I only felt an overwhelming chill. Perhaps he was just too busy. After our 2 children grew up, I still used these words to console myself. It was like holding on to a rope. Below was an abyss. I had given too much. And the sunk cost was too high, which led me to such a situation. I couldn't move forward, nor could I retreat. Later, how later? I died. Siren began to stay by Traitor's side as if it were perfectly natural. My children had to take a back seat. They were reluctant, but they didn't dare to resist. Since I was already dead, what they wanted was to secure Traitor's assets. So they tacitly accepted Siren's intrusion. They even called her mom with a smile. All my life had been erased. And not a single trace of it was left. I had sacrificed a lot for Traitor. But everyone refused to admit it because of their own selfish motives. I had lived my whole life, clinging to this man for my entire life. In the end, it all vanished like smoke. This kind of persistence without seeing the way forward was really exhausting. I didn't say these words to Traitor. I just looked at him in silence. Outside, planes were taking off and landing continuously. I didn't want to stay any longer, so I said, "If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving now." Traitor suddenly stopped me. "Aurora, Siren has left." I was taken aback. Where was she buried? Traitor didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "She went abroad." I nodded. "Oh." Traitor was unwilling. "Aren't you curious?" "All right. Then I'm curious." "Why?" He seemed to have opened the floodgates of his words. Or rather, he had found someone to confide in. "She said she has received an offer from abroad. Her parents have already become legal citizens there. And she will also settle there in the future." Traitor gave a bitter smile. "She also said that her parents have found a suitable match for her. The man's family comes from an educated background and is a good match for hers." I knew this. Siren's parents were both professors and thought highly of themselves. It was normal for them to look down on Traitor's business-oriented family. I laughed. "That's a pity." However, there was a hint of mockery in my laughter. I was laughing at my own self-importance and also at myself for deserving it. I regarded something that others didn't want as a precious treasure. I guessed that in the previous life, Siren was also laughing at my unsophisticated appearance. But this kind of laughter seemed to have caused Traitor to misunderstand. He looked at me and suddenly asked, "Aurora, how about we give it a try?" I stood there in a daze, as if I couldn't hear any other sounds. In the previous life, Traitor asked me, "Aurora, shall we give dating a try?" This time, he still had that same look in his eyes. "Aurora, how about we give it a try?" But this time, I had the courage to refuse. "No, Traitor. You're too filthy." The next day at work, Traitor took a leave of absence. A colleague who was on good terms with him said mysteriously that he had been in a car accident the day before and then booked a flight ticket to go abroad today. He even showed us Raiders WeChat moments. There was a photo of a plane taking off, and a sentence was written, "Fortunately, it's not too late." This sentence passed by me like a falling leaf without a sound, and I quickly forgot about it. As for Protector, he seemed to have forgotten what happened at the airport that day. And he treated me like a normal employee. I felt relieved. Thank goodness. I didn't have to resign. With such a high salary, I was still a bit reluctant to leave. As for Traitor, he never showed up again. Time passed quickly. And in the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. I became the planning supervisor of the marketing department. Many times, I would also go to negotiate business with Protector. After getting along with him, I realized that Protector's methods were much more ruthless than Traitor's. My experience from the previous life was simply insignificant in front of him. When going out with him, I didn't have to get drunk to secure a deal. On the contrary, he was the one who would drink. Many times, he would stand in front of me to protect me. No wonder everyone was willing to work under Protector. Which employee wouldn't want such a considerate boss? Just as my career was booming, Traitor came back. He wasn't alone. This time, he had an engagement with Siren. To this end, he even sent me an invitation card. It was bright red, with their names outlined in gold. I felt a bit melancholy. If I agreed to attend, I would probably have to spend a lot on the wedding gift. Aurora, President Protector is looking for you. I thought it was about the proposal from the day before. So I put this matter aside and went directly with the new proposal. Unexpectedly, Protector also took out the same invitation card. Think about it. Let's go together. Huh? Protector had only one request, which was for me to attend as his female companion. He was already at the age to get married. Now that Traitor was married, he still showed no signs of getting married. He showed me the dense messages from the elders of the Protector family urging him to get married. I was silent. It turned out that even wealthy people had this kind of trouble. Protector didn't beat around the bush and directly transferred 100 yuan into my card. An extra bonus. Will you go? Yes. I was full of enthusiasm. Having been reborn, it would be foolish not to make money. So I took it very seriously, fearing that I would embarrass my boss. I specially dressed up before going. Protector was already waiting for me at the hotel entrance. He looked me up and down before raising his arm with satisfaction. Not bad. These two concise words were not easy for someone with his personality who didn't like to praise others. I happily reached out my hand and said, "Thank you, boss, for the compliment." Traitor showed full sincerity in his wedding this time. Not only was the hotel located in a prime location where every inch of land was precious, but the decoration was also very grand. There were all kinds of fresh flowers and exquisitely crafted sculptures. Siren cared about face, and this wedding really stole the show. When Protector and I entered, they were greeting guests at the entrance. I didn't know if it was my illusion, but when Raider saw me holding Protector's hand, his face darkened for a moment, but soon his happy expression returned, although his smile seemed a bit forced. Next to him were Traitor's parents, and Protector introduced me to them one by one. This time, without the shackles of the identity of daughter-in-law, I no longer felt nervous and constrained in my actions. It was just that Protector's mother looked at me with overly eager eyes, which made me feel a bit uncomfortable. Since I was Protector's female companion, I was arranged to sit at the main table. I whispered, "President Protector, isn't this a bit inappropriate?" Protector looked at me with a smile and leaned close to my ear, whispering, "Just eat." His breath sprayed on my ear. It seemed that I hadn't been that close to someone for a long time. I unconsciously leaned back a bit, but accidentally touched Protector's cheek. I almost froze in place. My heart was beating extremely fast. I don't remember what happened next. That inexplicable throbbing was too scary, and it even made me break out in cold sweat on my back. Suddenly, a bouquet of flowers was thrown into my arms. It turned out that the bride didn't control the strength well and threw it in the opposite direction. Siren's face didn't look good. "Sorry, miss. I threw it to the wrong person." Her words were almost without any courtesy. All eyes turned to me, and I felt uneasy for a moment. It turned out that no matter how much I tried to forget, my subconscious reaction wouldn't lie. Before I could react, Protector stood up first and took the bouquet of flowers from my arms. "Lucky you." He looked down at me. I looked up in astonishment. In the quiet environment, I could even hear the rapid beating of my own heart. It seemed that something was about to happen. I heard Protector holding the microphone, and his voice could be heard throughout the venue. If it weren't for this bouquet of flowers, I don't think I would have dared to express my feelings. He lowered his stance, completely sweeping away the embarrassment that Siren had caused me just now. "Aurora, let's start dating." What happened next was too fast. As soon as the words were out, Traitor jumped off the stage directly, grabbed Protector's collar, and punched him. I immediately stepped forward to stop him. "Traitor, are you crazy?" He turned to look at me. His eyes filled with red blood vessels. Even the veins on his forehead were bulging. A person's appearance may change, but their eyes won't. I stared at Traitor, feeling as if I had lost all my strength. I suddenly realized something, and a chill rose from the bottom of my heart. Traitor. He had also been reborn. That's why he rushed to find Sire, and despite the wounds from his car accident, it turned out that after he was reborn, The first thing he did was to find Siren. Just like when I died, he subconsciously contacted her. And then told the whole world. He loved her. Even the staff who handled their marriage certificate exclaimed that the two of them had a deep affection for each other. They could find each other again even after being separated for so many years. No one thought of the newly deceased original spouse. As long as there was the cloak of love. It seemed that everything could be covered up. Was all that I had done for Traitor just to let them be reunited by stepping on my bones? Whether in the previous life or this life, I was always Traitor's second choice. I don't know where the courage came from, but I grabbed the red wine bottle beside me. Heavily, almost using all my strength. There was only one thought in my mind. Go to hell. You scumbag. I watched as his blood mixed with the color of the red wine. I heard Siren's shrill scream. Traitor covered his head and looked at me in disbelief. There was also deep fear in his eyes. What was he afraid of? He should be glad that it was a society ruled by law now. I still had some rationality left, but this out-of-control venting also cost me a price. However, the Traitor family still reached a settlement. And Traitor came that day. Why? It seemed that when facing me, he always had questions. I didn't answer and just remained silent. Aurora, do you know something? His voice was low, filled with infinite guilt. I just sneered. Know what? Know that you got the marriage certificate before my body was even cold. Or know that you were singing and dancing in my house, and celebrating your marriage with everyone. Deep love and youth. Growing old together. I didn't hide the sarcasm in my tone at all. Traitor. You really have a thick skin. His face instantly turned as pale as paper. So. You've known all along. Yes. I even watched you propose and watched the two of you get the marriage certificate. I still remembered that I had entered this marriage just because of a single sentence. I even clearly remembered that on the wedding day, he had promised. He would never cheat and would never have another wife. He said that he wouldn't let me end up hating each other like his parents did. I was so touched by those words that I thought I had finally seen the light after going through all the hardships. Now that I think about it, these were just empty promises on the surface. Perhaps because I was sensible. He thought he could keep his chastity for Siren. Later, he really didn't quarrel with me, but instead chose the cold violence. He started treating me with respect like a guest, and this continued until our later years. He had always been unwilling to live his whole life without properly marrying Siren. I originally thought that I loved Siren. His voice was full of pain and entanglement. But this time when I chased after her, I realized that we were not suitable at all. Aurora, I never knew that you had done so many things for me. He looked at me passionately and said, when my little uncle confessed to you that day, I don't know why, but I suddenly got so angry. Then I realized that I had already fallen in love with you. But my little uncle is different. He had improper thoughts about you since you joined the company during your college years. Traitor said eagerly. I remember this time I asked my little uncle to take care of you. But if I had known he had such thoughts, I would never have done it. Never have done what? I interrupted him. Traitor. After all, you just have a possessive desire for me. No, it's not. Traitor said nervously. This time I've seen my heart clearly. I will get a divorce. For you, heading till celebrate session. I will divorce Siren. Then what? But on the day of graduation, he called me to the bar. I prepared your clothes when you went on a business trip. I cooked you hangover soup when you were drunk. I arranged everything in your life properly. My voice became colder and colder. Let me think. Why have you changed your mind now? Traitor didn't dare to look at me. Because Siren is not as good as you think. Siren was born into a highly educated family, and had a wealthy family background since childhood. She rarely considered others. And Traitor was already used to my dedication. It was true that he liked Siren. But he could no longer get used to a life without someone carefully arranging things for him. Siren was not me. And she would never lower her status. Traitor. I heard my own voice cold and distant. How dare you guarantee that I will treat you the same as before? Although I'm not smart, I also know that I can't fall into the same pit twice. I looked at him with a smile. He and Siren had already gotten the marriage certificate. If they got a divorce, A large portion of their property would definitely be divided. I really wanted to see how the two of them would get along harmoniously this time. I also wanted to see how the two who had a deep affection for each other in the previous life would hold hands and grow old together. Whether they could still clap their hands and dance happily in their later years. When she was making a fuss and he was smiling. Once it was related to another person's blood and tears. It would seem absurd and ridiculous. In this life, I wish you and Siren a lifetime of happiness together. I ignored his pleading and walked away directly. By the roadside, Protector was leaning against the car, with a faint look of nervousness on his face. I sighed. It seemed that I was destined to lose this job. Life was limited, and I couldn't waste the remaining time on love anymore. At least, not now. The end of the full text.